This is the June 22nd, 2020 regular SAM board meeting. And we are calling this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Director Penrose.
Here.
Director Dye. Director Dye, you're muted.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lohman.
Here.
Director Blanchard.
Here.
Director Ruddock, has she come in?
She just
Not as yet.
texted that she's having technical difficulty.
No, I see her. She's just getting connected. Director Ruddock.
Nope.
Here.
Very good.
Oh, I see her in two places.
Okay. Director Slater Carter.
Present.
Okay. All present.
Public comment, oral communication. I'm scrolling up and down the participants list, and I don't see any hands up. I see Michelle Dragony is here from the public. Hello, Michelle. And so let's move on with no public comment, oral communication to consent agenda. Approve the minutes of June 8, 2020 regular board meeting. Approve disbursements for June 22nd, 2020, and receive fiscal year 2019-2020 review and expense report for period ending May 31, 2020.
So move.
Second.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Deborah. Roll call vote, please.
Director Penrose.
Yes.
Director Dye.
Yes.
Director Lohman.
Yes.
Director Ruddock.
Yes.
Director Blanchard.
Yes.
Chair Slater Carter.
Yes. Motion, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Moving on to item 4, regular business. 4A is approve the general manager to execute a contract with Calcon Systems, Inc. for routine electrical maintenance and SCADA support services at SAM facilities.
This is regarding an RFP which was sent out, a request for proposal which was sent out for routine electrical maintenance and SCADA support services at SAM facilities, that is the wastewater treatment plant, as well as the 3 pump stations that SAM owns. So just to take you back to date, in December 2018, we actually sent out an RFP based on the board's direction, and we got Calcon to be awarded a contract for providing the electrical services in the year 2019. And further on in October 2019, we extended the contract until June 2020 so that we could have the contracts going into a financial year rather than a calendar year. And at the same time, the board also gave directions to go out for an RFP again for the financial year 2021. And therefore, sent out an RFP for...
Uh-oh. Everybody mute. There's something going on.
Okay. Therefore, staff sent out an RFP for the electrical services and obtained 3 bids this time. We actually sent out to 6 qualified electrical firms, and we received only 3 in response to that. Out of that, somebody's phone. Oh no. Okay.
Someone needs to mute.
Yeah. Could you please mute whoever is not speaking? Yes. Okay. 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 So
Thank you.
we received thank you very much. We received response from 3 vendors, which was Calcon, Telstar, and Tesco Controls. And the analysis of their bids has been done. It's in your packet. And the basis for the RFP was on a cost evaluation criteria, which was to be considered, assuming that SAM has a requirement of 1,100 hours of electrical work, which is which is on a regular basis, 300 hours of programming, which is again on a standard time, and 100 hours each of overtime and premium work. So based on this, the cost criteria was calculated, and this was the same criteria which was adopted even last time when we awarded the contract to Calcon. There was no change in the bid documents or in the RFP documents. Sorry, and staff recommends Calcon to be awarded the contract as it is the apparent lowest and responsive bidder, and also that we've been doing business with Calcon for more than 20 years. In fact, digging up the past history, we received their first quotation in the year 1996.
Wow.
And we've been working with Calcon ever since then. And we've had nothing but success working with them, no complaints. They're always very responsive. There is a requirement in the RFP that they need to be on call and should be available within 4 hours of call, be it working day, a holiday, a weekend, or whatever. And they have complied with that requirement in full, and therefore staff would recommend that the contract be awarded to Calcon. And moving further, the staff also requests that we extend the contract so that we can renew it and give them a 4 one-year contracts, which can be renewed every year based on Sam's experience with them, so that we don't have to go out again for the RFP every year. And now I'm available for any questions and discussions, please.
Barbara.
I'm in support of this. Clearly, there's someone that you have confidence in, and it's something that's needed. But I have a couple questions about this. It's $350,000 is a lot of money, and it seems as if, is this something that we? I don't think it is, but is it something we're committed to? What if we need that much service during the year ahead? What happens?
Yeah, our experience indicates that we do have such a requirement because we do not have an electrician with us on the staff. Neither do we have an electrical engineer. There has been a lot of maintenance going on in the electrical on the electrical accessories which we have at the plant and at the pump stations. Plus, we do a lot of programming. There are issues with SCADA PLCs and a lot of things because we haven't really.
What happens if we need more time than this contract it covers?
If we need more time, then I bring it back to the board and get an approval from the board.
But if things are going well and we need less time, we still have to pay this amount?
Yes, we don't have to pay it. This is just a not to exceed number based on the.
We don't.
Not to exceed. We don't have to pay. This is just a not to exceed number. It's not a lump sum payment. It is totally based on the number of hours that Calcon spends.
So can you just talk for a minute about why this is better than having an electrician on staff? I mean, that would be considerably less expensive. Again, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to understand why we're spending $350,000 for electrical services.
Yeah, I don't say that that's not a good idea to have a staff, but in the past we've seen that getting an electrician who has the capability of doing electrical work as well as programming, SCADA programming from the same person is not possible because you need several certifications for the SCADA. They should be familiar with our ignition programming as well as a certified electrician. And as this firm does not use one electrician always, they have multiple people who come depending on the type of work that we need. Whether we need electrical work, Mr. X comes. If we need SCADA work, Mr. Y comes. So there is expertise available under this firm for multidisciplinary jobs.
But in their response to the RFP, they only show us one licensed electrician.
They also show the SCADA ignition certificate holders. It's just one of the holders. The RFP requires at least one person should be certified. And therefore, they've just indicated the certificates of one person.
So if that person's not available, they provide another person, or?
Yes, always.
And they've
Because,
been responsive to the needs of SAM.
yes, there has been response. There's been a lot of response on that. As you know, every human being takes vacation or is not available, and this is not the only job that they've got. They've got several other projects. So that specific person may not be available all the time. But if there is a need at the plant, there's always somebody from this firm who comes and helps us out.
Because we have this ongoing contract with them.
Because we have this ongoing contract, and because they are familiar, and because they do not have turnover of their staff, we have a lot of people who are dedicated and who are who are knowledgeable in the SAM operations and are available on the call.
What is the ratio of the work that they do between sort of general, I don't know, maintenance and so forth, and in responding to emergencies or, emergency situations?
That is indicated by the number of hours that we have indicated in the RFP. I believe we've said 1,100 hours of standard time and 300 hours, if I'm right. I'm just seeing the RFP for the emergency. Yeah, we've said 1,100 hours of 1,100 hours of electrical, 300 hours of programming. That's 1,400 hours of standard time and 100 hours of emergency, at least overtime and premium work. 100, 200 hours totally, just to give you an idea. Because emergency occurs, I would presume it occurs after office hours. So we give 100 hours of overtime and premium work, which is on the weekends or on holidays. We've set aside 100 hours. So roughly about 200 hours of emergency services with maybe 1,100 hours of regular working hours.
And how much emergency time have we needed so far this year?
I presume we have consumed almost the 100 hours, I would say.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know very much about this, but I'm interested in knowing more about it. So in a year from now, when it comes around again, I'll be interested to ask some of these questions again. Thank you very much. I'm prepared to support this. You're muted.
Catherine, you're muted.
You're muted, Catherine.
I'm sorry, my dog had been barking. Do we have any more questions from board members? Deborah Ruddock.
Yeah, so it looks like a good price. So Keishan, you've had a lot of experience now with CalCon. Do you feel that's a satisfactory experience, an excellent experience?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that we had an excellent experience with CalCon. We've never had an issue where we had to wait for the electrician to come and there was a catastrophic, damage to SAM just because of the wait for the staff to come in, for their staff to come and attend to it. They've been very responsive, I would say.
Okay, so I would like to move the, per staff and just say that, it's a specialist contract, small agency like ours, contracting with specialists is kind of a natural thing. So I've not heard any complaints about CalCon. They've been here when we've needed them. So again, I'm moving the recommendation for staff.
Do we have a second? Second from Deborah. Second from, was that from you, Barbara?
Yes. In spite of my, I would like to second this. I was not objecting to the contract. I just wanted a little more information.
Questions are always good. let's have a roll call vote with a motion and a second, and I don't see any more discussion. No hands waving. Okay, so a roll call vote, please.
Now, one clarification is a motion for awarding this for 1 year with a renewal of 4 one-year options.
Yes, it's for
Yes.
the staff recommendation. Yeah.
Okay.
We
Thank you
have
very
the
much.
option to renew, correct?
Yes, we have the option for renewal every 1 year. Okay. Roll call. Director Penrose,
Yes, yes,
Director Dye,
Yes.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Roddick,
Yes.
Director Blanchard,
Yes.
Chair Slater Carter.
Yes,
Motion passed.
thank you. Moving right along to 4B. Oh, I'm sorry, that motion passed unanimously. Moving on to 4B, adopt resolution number 5-2020, adopting the Sewer Authority Midcoastside General Budget for fiscal year 2020 and 2021, and adopting the position control list in the attachment.
Okay, this is the same general budget which was brought to the board prior to 2 meetings, and the board had given direction to the general manager to pass it on to the to the other member agencies for approval. And all the 3 agencies, City of Half Moon Bay, Granada, and Montara, have approved the budget. And this is the final call for SAM board to adopt the resolution and move forward with the budget. There's been no change in the budget, but I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Thank you. I don't see any questions.
I move that we approve the budget as for the document.
Thank you, Director Penrose. And a second?
Second.
Second from Jim Blanchard. Discussion? Hearing none, let's have a roll call vote.
Director Penrose,
Yes,
Director Dye,
Yes.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Roddick,
Yes.
Director Blanchard,
Yes.
Chair Slater Carter.
Yes. And this budget passed unanimously. And since Michelle Dragany, a reporter, is on, could you please, Keishan, talk about the number briefly of finance committee meetings and board meetings at SAM, and then board meetings at each of the member agencies, and so that it doesn't look like we just got given this budget and passed it. We've been working on it for 6 months, I think.
Yes, in fact, we took the help of management partners. We have the staff from management partners, Hussain and Mandy, here with us now. And without their assistance, we would not have been able to complete the budget on time. Thanks to both of them. And we had a number of meetings in the finance committee as well as the SAM board. I would say that we started the budget work pretty early in January. And ever since then, we've been having continuous meetings, at least finance committee meetings. We've been having at least 2 meetings every month, rigorous meetings for about 1 or 2 hours. And then among staff, we've been having meetings. We've been having meetings with member agency managers multiple times, and did a lot of changes in the budget so that we could reflect a reduction in the budget, and spent several hours. And this was a task which was not easy in the beginning, but then as we progressed, we realized that we were able to find the answers ourselves, and we brought it to the board in April as a draft budget for the first time, and then we had discussions. We brought it back to the board again in May, and at that time, the board gave direction to the general manager to take it to the member agencies, and the staff, including me and my finance officer, participated in the meetings at both Montara and Granada, and gave a PowerPoint presentation to the boards, addressed the various questions the public had at that point of time. And got it approved, and we are back here now to get it adopted.
Thank you. And we went through that same procedure for the next item, 4C, which is to adopt Resolution 6-2020, adopting the Sewer Authority Midcoastside Contract Collection Services Budget for fiscal year
Yes.
2020-2021.
Yes, we went through the same process, and the collection services budget has been approved by all the three agencies, City of Half Moon Bay, Montara, and Granada. And this is brought to the SAM board for adopting. And the best part of it is that there is an overall reduction of about 17% in the collections budget. And the three member agencies have a significant reduction. Half Moon Bay has a reduction of about 27. Sorry, Half Moon Bay has a slight increase in 27%. Granada has a reduction of 37%, and Montara has a reduction of 24%. There has been an increase in Half Moon Bay because we have increased the Half Moon Bay has increased the number of lines to be cleaned and a couple of things associated with it, and therefore the cost has gone up. Otherwise, overall, the budget has decreased by 17%. And I must thank Dan Child for assisting us with that and getting us a wonderful budget. Available for any questions and discussions, please.
Thank you. I'm looking for hands up either on participants. I see Barbara Dye.
Just
Thank
one
you,
thing I
Barbara.
want to say, which is that I appreciate the fact that we have the SAM trained staff who are familiar with our system doing this work. And I think it's really important, the idea of bringing in someone else. This is an ideal situation. We have people who live here on the coast side mostly, who are responsible for dealing with emergencies and who are taking care of our system. So I think it's a way for us to contract for these services. So I think this is a good thing.
Good, thank you. I don't see any more hands up or comments. I'd love to have a motion.
So moved. Staff recommendation.
That was Deborah Ruddock, and the second is Deborah Penrose. I see no discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Director Penrose,
Yes.
Director Dye,
Yes.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Ruddock,
Yes.
Director Blanchard,
Yes.
Chair Slater Carter.
Yes. Motion
Motion
carries
passed.
unanimously. And moving on to 4D, recommended general manager's performance evaluation process. And Keishan and Christopher are going to address that first.
Yes, there. SAM board had appointed an ad hoc committee, and the committee discussed. We've had 2 meetings in the past and arrived at this performance evaluation procedure or the process. And I'll turn it over to Chris Boucher to walk you through this, and we'll be ready. We'll be here.
Good evening, honorable
Any
directors.
questions? Over to Chris, please.
And Keisha, may I trouble you to grant me access to share my screen, please?
I believe you have access now.
Thank you, sir.
You should have access now.
Wow, I feel so powerful. All right, good evening, directors. I hope everybody could see the screen.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So like Keishan said, the purpose of meeting with the board tonight to discuss this item is to share the recommended process that the ad hoc committee have been working on over the past couple of weeks. As the board recall, back in May, we brought the item to the board to consider with regards to starting a process for the general manager's performance evaluation, and the board appointed an ad hoc committee consisting of 1 director from each member agency to provide input, and they've worked really hard. We met several times with both Keishan and I to explore different options with the ad hoc committee, and we've talked about pretty much just about every option imaginable. And this is the process that we feel at the present time best fit the needs of the agency. Which we'll go over tonight. And there's also written materials that accompany this item. With the appointment of a new general manager late last year, we now have Keishan as our new general manager. And part of the board's desire is to adopt a more formal performance evaluation process. And this process is also consistent with the terms of his employment agreement, in which the board may periodically review the general manager's performance. At the present time, we're recommending an annual process because it does take a little bit of time to gather all the input and feedback. And so we feel an annual cycle along with periodic feedback as the board may wish to do so throughout the year would be totally fine. But the idea is to come up with a formal process and instruments that we can utilize throughout the year to see if the GM what we've set out to do, have we done them? And at the end of the year, there's also an objective criteria that we can use in order to evaluate the general manager's performance. So I wanted to thank Chair Slater Carter, as well as Directors Dye and Penrose for their help, not only in coming up with a process, but they also came up with an instrument along with a goals and objectives form. They've also looked at the current job description and recommended one non-material change, which we'll bring back to the board at a later time just to review and approve that as well. But we've got pretty much everything ready to go. So tonight is just to, I get the privilege of doing the show and tell just to share with the board what the ad hoc committee has come up with. With regards to the purpose of the performance evaluation, just like with any one of our employees here at SAM, we do want to have performance goals and objectives that are measurable at the end of the year, that are comprehensive and really hits the core of the job. And the GM's position is no different. Albeit, the GM definitely focuses at a greater span of control because the GM is ultimately responsible for the entire success of the agency. But we did basically take a look at those job descriptions and come up with performance dimensions that we believe at the end of the year, and we've deduced it down to 9 total that we can look at and say, has the GM met each and every one of the performance dimension that we've come up with, and to also have a written document at the end of the year to memorialize that process. And the way the ad hoc committee had envisioned it, it's also a collaborative process. So it's both the GM and the board working together to come up with goals and objectives that both parties feel best serves the needs of the agency, and then along having some procedures to help guide that process. What we're proposing for the board's consideration tonight is a 360 review process. I know many of you have heard of a 360 from different places. This one has a bit of a twist to it. In most larger organizations, typically a 360 would consist of surveys that are sent out to different stakeholders. And in our case, we're kind of identifying the population into 6 different categories of individuals, including the board, the general manager, general counsel, SAM employees, external auditor, and member agency GMs, in which we can invite them to participate. And the reason why we thought, because of the size of SAM, we don't have a lot of employees. Both the board and employees and all of the stakeholders are also extremely busy. So one of the roadblocks that we sometimes run into in a more traditional 360 process where we send out surveys is it's very hard to get the surveys back, and it also lacks a level of interactivity. And so rather than just having a bunch of numeric scores come in that don't necessarily mean a whole lot, the ad hoc committee envisions a more in-depth but also a more substantive feedback process from all the stakeholders. So this is where a third-party facilitator comes in and can provide that layer of kind of assistance to both the board and to the process, in which they can work with each of the stakeholders, interview them, and have more of a substantive dialogue. All the aggregate data will still come back the same way, in which we get to see all the aggregate data, and then depending on where they fall based on each dimension, we can provide the results back to the board, so the board can look at overall, this is the feedback from everyone. And it also allows the parties to speak a little more frankly when you use a third-party facilitator rather than having the GM, right, query every individual on their own performance. So that was the concept behind it. So in terms of a 360 review, obviously there are pros and cons to every evaluation instrument and every process. But with the new general manager, I think the ad hoc committee is also recognizing the need to provide ongoing and substantive feedback that is helpful, both for the GM success as well as the overall success of the agency. The intent is to also make it comprehensive, so it covers all 9 of the performance dimensions that we'll be discussing in the next couple of slides, so that it hits every core area. And when we do the interviews with all the stakeholders, it also will capture all the relevant performance dimension that we've come up to design. The other part of kind of thinking about the use of a third-party facilitator is also just kind of necessity. The board is extremely busy. There's a lot on your agenda day in and day out. And so to add this process on top of it, having a person that reports directly to the board, that is held accountable to the board and can move that process along, and to gather all the data for the board's consideration sometimes can help us stay on track and also help move that process tremendously. And then one of the things that the board had also shared is all board members have stated an affirmation that they wanted to provide general oversight as well as to provide their input and feedback as part of the process. And we can do that under this kind of facilitated 360 review process through the use of a facilitator as well. And then lastly, right, with every performance evaluation, just like everything we do at SAM, it's about ensuring accountability, both to ourselves, but to also to the public of which we serve. This is a somewhat of a roadmap, if you will, in terms of the steps that it takes to get there. I know at first glance it looks a little overwhelming. There are a lot of steps involved, but with the process designed by the board, I think it's a very clearly defined process. Every stakeholder, every kind of person that's in a category has a clearly defined role and what our contributions would be. And that's embedded in the procedure itself. But basically, it just starts with every year, the board and the GM will agree on the performance dimensions for that year. We'll also look at the evaluation instrument. Hopefully, with the work that we've done today, it doesn't require much changing year to year, but rather, both the dimensions and the instruments can stay pretty much the same, and maybe we can make some tweaks in between. But starting out with the process and setting it up always takes the most work. And hopefully from there on after each year, we can just follow the procedures and it's a little more smooth sailing. The GM, one of the things we wanted the GM to do as well is to submit his or her list of accomplishments for the year that are based on the original goals and objectives that have been set prior to the commencement of the year. So that way we can have a look back to see what we've accomplished and what might still be outstanding and what might be goals that, because of circumstances, we may need to carry that over or defer that to a following year and so forth. All of the evaluators at this stage, this is box number 4, will have a chance to provide their feedback directly to the facilitator. And again, we'll collect in step 5 all of the aggregate results of which we can then present it to the operations committee to kind of take a quick peek and then provide any directions as they may need in terms of if there's more information that needs to be gathered. But if not, then the draft evaluation will be prepared and the board can look at it as a whole and provide feedback from there. The board will also look at the goals and objectives for the upcoming year. So part of this is to build accountability, and it's the full cycle every year that if there's, kind of as we wrap up the year, we also want to look at prospectively what is to come next year and what the board may have in terms of goals and objectives of things that needs to be accomplished. And then, of course, this will all wrap up with the board meeting with the general manager to discuss the evaluation and have a substantive dialogue between the parties to kind of further and enhance the communication process between the board and the general manager. This is just a more kind of timeline view of what we've just gone over. but in a couple months' time. So what we're recommending is 3 months prior to kind of when the evaluation is due. And in this case for Keishan, it would be based on his anniversary date. He was originally appointed in December. So we're suggesting starting that process in about the August, September timeframe. Of course, we're doing some of the legwork now in June. So that also saves a little time when we get to September. But this is just a more kind of timeline view, just to depending on which way you like to look at it, just to show another side of how this will run on a timeline basis. And then what we also did is we took a look at the current job description of the general manager. And obviously, we're summarizing a very lengthy document in just about a paragraph. But this is looking at sort of the overarching responsibilities of the general manager and how can we translate that into actual measurable performance objectives and criteria. And what we've done is the ad hoc committee has taken everything, every kind of bullet point in the job description, and came up with these 9 sort of overarching areas that we would like to look at. And hopefully these won't change, but maybe the duties, the tasks, and what the goals and objectives are within that year would change. But the umbrellas of kind of, I call these the buckets where they fall into, would be pretty consistent based on our understanding of the current general manager's job description. So in terms of directions and next steps, tonight's meeting is really to provide the board with an opportunity to take a look at the draft documents that are included in the agenda packet, take a look at the draft procedures and evaluation instruments that have been discussed at length and also recommended by the ad hoc committee. And then to the board's satisfaction and subject to whatever changes the board may have, we can either approve it tonight or come back at a subsequent meeting, but we can approve the procedures going forward and to also authorize staff to initiate the process for the general manager's performance review for this year, which would start September 2020. And I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Catherine. You're muted.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you could tell I was muted.
That's what we're here for.
So many people wish I
pretending
were more.
to hear you.
Thank you. I see a hand up from Deborah Ruddock. So let's start there. Before we go into it, I just want to thank Barbara and Deborah Penrose and Christopher and Keishan for really moving us towards a professional basis for a very good job review process for the general manager. It's been a long time coming, and I hope future boards will. I think your PowerPoint should be at the start of the file and in a handbook for every new director. I think this is you have to have good personnel review to have a good system. So Deborah Ruddock.
Actually, I did not have my hand up. I think I may have raised my hand in the last item and it didn't go away.
Okay, because it's a blue hand on the from the chat function on the list of names.
Okay, so that's an old one. But
that's an old one. Okay.
I'll just take this opportunity to say that, it looks very process heavy to me, and we're going to have money spent on consultants, but I'm going to support it. I think we need to establish a process that's been kind of loosey-goosey for a while, not happy with the process to date. We were investing in a new general manager who seems to be doing a pretty good job, but I think we want to establish a precedent. And I would like to thank the ad hoc committee that spent a lot of time with us. I know it's been going on for a while. So thank you, and I will support the project.
Thank you very much. Rick Lohman.
Yeah, I just wanted to second Catherine's comments about supporting the board committee. They did a great job with Chris on this. The challenge we've had in the past when we've done this is every meeting late in the afternoon, late in the evening, all of a sudden we're running out of time and we punt to the next meeting. I would just challenge the board to, what we really need to do is follow that schedule, and let's do this thing totally right this time. And as Deborah said, let's set a great precedent on how we're supposed to do this. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Barbara Dye.
I agree. I was one of the people pushing to get this in place. I think not the only one. It is very heavy on process and consultant time. I think we need that. We need to get that started. I think as we go forward with this, we might be able to streamline it a little or do the full thing every other year. But I'm really strongly in favor of starting with this process. And I think it will help us avoid some of the problems that we've had in the past.
Thank you. Do I see any more comments? I see no more.
I want to thank Chris also for doing a great job in helping us.
Yes, Christopher is amazing. I'm looking for the requested action, which is recommendation. General counsel recommends that the board discuss and approve the procedures as recommended by the ad hoc committee.
So moved.
So do we have, so moved. Do we have that was Barbara Dye and a
Jumped
second
right in there. I wanted to be the one.
Motion by Barbara Dye, second by Deborah Ruddick, and discussion. Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Director Penrose?
Yes, I'm going to say aye, but I also want to give out a special thanks to Chris for his hard work. He really helped us get ourselves organized on this. And even though it is process heavy, I think for the first time around, I'd rather have it too heavy than too light. We can always pare it down. So aye.
Director Dye?
Yes, aye.
Director Lohman?
Yes.
Director Ruddock?
Yes.
Director Blanchard?
Yes.
Chair Slater Carter?
Yes, gladly, yes, happily, yes. Thank you. Moving right along then, oops, I've got to flip backwards. We are at the end of general and we're at reports. General manager's report.
Okay, you have the general manager's reports in your packet, but before we go into that, I'd like to inform the board and the public, of course, that we had launched a flushable wipes video on YouTube, which pops up as a 30-second advertisement when people view it in certain zip codes in Half Moon Bay and other areas. I got the stats back today, which said that it has been viewed about 266,000 times, and 100% of the video, the entire 30 seconds, has been viewed by about 59,000 people, or there have been 59,000 views.
Wow.
That is for the past 3 months, and that's pretty good stats that I've been told. And besides that, Sam's staff has also put out posters indicating that flushable wipes should not be flushed. So there could be a reason that it could be because of the video as well as the posters, that there has been certain decrease in the wipes that we found at the pump stations and lift stations. It could not be attributed only to this, but definitely there has been a decrease. And I should also thank Michelle Dragoni for also publicizing it in Coastside Buzz and making sure that the public knows about it. So I just wanted to give this, pass on this news to everyone.
One of them.
Okay, and then if there are any questions on the manager's report, we are here to answer. That's all, please.
Okay, let me see. Do I see any questions, Rick? No, I see no one. Deborah Ruddick.
This is just a comment. So The indication that it seems like the amount of wipes in the system is going down. And I think that's extra remarkable because during this COVID pandemic we've had, people are actually buying more of them. They're flying off the shelves. You go places and they're backlogged. So the fact that people are using more, but there's less in the system, I think means that the message is getting out there. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Barbara Dye.
I will note that there was a tiny spill in El Granada that they think was a root ball of rags, which I assume is probably wipes that caused the problem. And it was actually connected to a home, and they cleaned it up. And the homeowner was going to have to contact their own plumber. But we have continued to have small problems from wipes throughout the system, and I think this was the last one, hopefully.
Knock on wood. Yes, thank you. Let me see. I don't see any more comments, so thank you very much, Keishan. Let's move on to item 6, Attorney's Report.
Yes, good evening, directors. I have nothing specific to report now, but we'll have some things to discuss in closed session.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, Directors' Reports. Rick Lohman.
Real quickly, LAFCO report from last week. The interesting item is they've scheduled the MSRs, which are the municipal service reviews, for the next year or so. We're pretty good on the coast. There's nothing happening here except that they're going to do the Harbor District also this year. That was in partial pushed by our supervisor, Don Horsley. RCD is going to be reviewed this year. South San Francisco and Westboro Water District will be reviewed. San Bruno and Millbrae cities will be reviewed. And Burlingame, Hillsborough, and Foster City will be reviewed early in 21. So again, we won't have to be going through that this year. We should, as I get a schedule for the future, I'll help on that. But they will be reviewing the Harbor District this year.
And they're going to be reviewing the Harbor District. Our member of the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Horsley, would like to dissolve the Harbor District. And he has been very open about that comment with people I know who told me, because they know I'm a very big fan of local government. And so it is something that people who value our Harbor District need to pay attention to. It has gone to district elections, so it will have representatives from all over the county, not just from the coast. And I think it would be, my personal opinion, give time for the redistricting to take effect and see what happens. So thank you. Director, topics for future board consideration are attached. Do we have any others that people want to add? Barbara.
Well, I don't want to add anything, but I'm just curious. And actually, this is the first time I've really paid attention to this. But it seems like maybe the Draft Records Act policy, is this something that needs to be updated? It shows that it was scheduled for 9/23/19, and it's still on the policy for minutes. Same thing. And then the strategic plan, it's my understanding, it was certainly done, the strategic plan was done before I joined this board, and I haven't actually reviewed it. I will do that, but I'm wondering if these 3 things maybe could be bumped up for us to think about in the months ahead.
I think now that we're done with the budgets, we will have more time for, and the general manager's review, we will have more time to work on these.
Sure.
Okay, I don't see Any other suggestions? Moving on, we are going to recess from open session and convene in closed session. It's 7:54, so let's take 5 minutes, 6 minutes.